I can still hear that little brass bell on the front door of my shop ringing in my nightmares. It literally just wouldn't stop. Picture this, okay? It's the spring of 1964. The sidewalk outside my record store is absolutely swamped. Just a chaotic crowd of teenagers, packed shoulder to shoulder, spilling out onto the pavement, completely feverish. You could feel this crackling electricity in the air, a genuine physical tension. Today, we're diving into an explainer about a singular point in time that defies all logic, all precedent, and all subsequent attempts to recreate it. We're talking about a week so extraordinary, so completely unhinged, that music history enthusiasts, and, well, old shopdogs like me, still marvel at it with a sense of pure suspense. Get ready, because we are talking about the week of April 4, 1964, an unprecedented moment in music history that violently ripped the roof off the industry and turned absolutely everything upside down.
Folks around the industry call it the Insane Week. And you gotta remember, back then, the Billboard Hot 100 wasn't just some abstract metric you tapped on your phone. Oh no, it was the absolute lifeblood of the whole industry. I remember vividly tearing open the delivery boxes every single week just to pull out that thick, glossy sheet of paper, the physical radio chart. And man, that piece of paper, it was a battlefield. It was this fiercely guarded territory where artists fought tooth and nail for a single inch of ground, just a single spot in the top 100 to prove they had captured the public's attention. It dictated what folks heard on their transistors, what they rushed in to buy from my bins, and what literally everyone talked about down at the diner. To truly understand the gravity of this week, you have to recognize that what happened on this printed piece of paper wasn't just a victory, it was a total conquest that completely destroyed what we all thought was mathematically possible.
So, think about the entire history of modern music as a long, steady timeline. Right before 1964, music trends moved to this predictable, leisurely pace. You had your crooners, you had early rock and roll, a hit song would climb the charts, peak, and gracefully fall back down over a matter of months. It was orderly, kind of predictable. But then, smack in the center of that timeline sits this specific spring date, April 4, 1964. It is a massive, violent anomaly. The sheer fan frenzy leading up to this date was deafening. Kids weren't just buying records, they were having complete emotional meltdowns over them, right in the aisles. The history of the music charts is quite literally divided into everything that happened before this week and everything that has happened since. It's this towering, isolated spike on the graph of history, completely disconnected from the normal, civilized progression of music. Decades stretch out into the future, and yet this one moment remains completely untouchable, hovering over everything like a ghost.
Let's move into the climax of our story. Unthinkable domination.
14. Let that sink in for a second. That is the staggering, incredibly heavy metric that dropped onto my counter that week. 14 different tracks from the Beatles, simultaneously occupying real estate on the most competitive music chart in the entire world. No way, right? But to grasp the true weight of that number, you really have to understand the mechanics behind the curtain. How on earth did they pull that off? Well, it came down to a brilliant, chaotic synergy between the fans and the airwaves. Back then, radio disc jockeys realized something pretty quickly. If they played a Beatles track, kids wouldn't change the dial. So station managers started running these ruthless, hourly rotations. They'd play multiple Beatles songs back-to-back every single hour, basically monopolizing the airwaves to keep listeners hooked. It created this inescapable feedback loop. You heard it on the radio, you literally ran down to my store to buy the 45, and the physical sales combined with that relentless airplay just drove the numbers right through the roof. It wasn't just a wave of popularity, it was a carefully broadcast flood that overtook the entire structural system in a single, solitary week.
Now I want you to compare that absolute supremacy against every other artist in history since then. Decades have passed, right? Thousands of incredibly talented, globally recognized superstars have released music. Yet, when you stack their highest peaks against the sheer scale of what happened on that one day in spring, the scales don't even twitch. So what does this all mean? Why hasn't any modern megastar been able to replicate this? Well, the answer actually lies in the harsh technical limitations of today's music consumption. See, modern streaming algorithms are fundamentally designed to fragment listener attention. They funnel us into personalized feeds, niche playlists, and these algorithmically generated bubbles. It makes it mathematically and practically impossible for a single artist to completely monopolize the global cultural consciousness and the charts, the exact way that physical, centralized radio dominance allowed back in '64. The mechanism for that level of ubiquitous saturation, it simply doesn't exist anymore.
I've stood behind that exact same wooden counter for decades. I've watched musical eras rise, fall, and fade away into the bargain bins. I've seen the biggest names in the world try to capture even a fraction of that lightning in a bottle, and honestly, I've watched them all fail. It truly is, and I quote, An unthinkable chart domination that no artist has come close to matching. Unthinkable. That's literally the only word for it. It forces every music historian and chart fanatic out there to reconsider what ultimate success actually looks like. We revere this achievement precisely because it stands as a monument completely untouched by time. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just a great week of sales. It was a permanent structural anomaly in the history of recorded music that is never, and likely could never, be repeated.
Which leaves us with one lingering, highly provocative question. Will this unthinkable domination ever be matched? When we weigh all the evidence, the fiercely guarded physical battlefields of the 60s, that impossible metric of 14 simultaneous hits driven by relentless hourly radio rotations, and of course, the deeply fragmented nature of modern streaming algorithms, it becomes pretty clear. The environment that birthed this perfect storm? It's just gone. The raw, unrepeatable power of that 1964 fan frenzy colliding with an industry perfectly primed for an absolute takeover, well, it created a one-time glitch in the matrix of music history. The dramatic reality is that so far, absolutely no one has even come close to the shadow of that week. And honestly, as someone who survived the crowds, the chaos, and the endless ringing bells of that spring, I really don't think anyone ever will.